Greetings, lovers of lore. Thank you for joining me for the third installment of the Duskmourn House of Horror story. Now, Wizards has released some side story information that I'm going to include before we go into the main story. The denizens of Duskmourn, that is the people who actually live in this world, who have been birthed here, had essentially a deal with the house where as long as they observed particular rituals, the house would let some of them live. And this served Duskmourn's purpose because it ultimately wants to have people's fear to feed on. But if it wipes everybody out, it will have no new denizens to terrify. But with the advent of the omen paths, the house can now reach out further, and it's luring in new individuals. And as a result, all those old accords with the current denizens of Duskmourn have been thrown aside, and they are all given over to being prey. Also, the naming conventions for residents of Duskmourn, like people named Winter, are based on concepts that are lost in the history of Duskmourn, concepts that no longer actually exist in the world. So people will have weird names. Also, they have developed the ability to make ghost and monster sensing devices using items that have been scavenged inside the house. So with that in mind, let us move on to the main story. This part of the story starts with Nico and the Wanderer after just being saved by a resident of Duskmourn named Winter. Nico studied Winter. He walked across the carpet, making sure to avoid stepping on any depictions of moths. He also had strips of wallpaper embedded in his clothes as a sort of camouflage. Could they trust him? He had saved them from that razorkin. Winter cautioned them both about stepping on the carpet moths. The Wanderer asked why, and Winter chuckled. How did you two even survive to make it this far? Duskmourn has you now. They asked Winter about the house. He explained that it was aware and had lured them in. The room they were in took a more ominous cast. It was getting too hot in here. This made Nico even more bitter about the lack of a planeswalker spark. The Wanderer explained that Duskmourn hadn't lured them in. They came here looking for Nashi. Nico insisted they would be all right. They just had to find their allies. The gadgets Niv Mizzet provided still functioned, transmitting data back to Ravnica. Everything was going to be okay. Help would come. Winter looked incredulous and scoffed at them. The Wanderer pulled out her sword and waved it in his face. Do not mock us. Winter nodded. This place is truly dangerous. Were you separated from the others by seemingly random impossibilities? That was Duskmourn dividing you. It wants you to be afraid. Winter went on to explain that the Razorkin they had narrowly avoided was a doomed soul claimed by Duskmourn, and they too could have ended up as raving masked madmen. Razorkin are clever and relentless, rebuilt by Duskmourn to be killing machines. There are more dangers here than just the Razorkin, and they'll never stop coming for you. Stick with me, don't touch any moths, don't trust what you see, move quickly, and never stay in the open. Assume everything is harmful except glimmers. When the Wanderer looked confused, he gestured to the air beside her. She turned and saw a small golden dragon made of light. Winter told her that everyone in Duskmourn had a glimmer. It's an embodiment of hopes and dreams. No one knows why they exist. Nico demanded to know why they could only see hers. Where were the others? Winter shrugged. We should follow her dragon. It should take us through a somewhat safe route. The Wanderer spoke to the glimmer, saying, please. It flew to a doorway, and they followed it. The story then switches over to Kaito, who is falling through the darkness. He slammed into the ground and seemed to be in a forest somehow. He could smell loam. Impossibly, he was just bruised when that fall should have broken bones or worse. The powers of this house were unnerving. The darkness around him lessened. He could see withered, rotting trees around him. He shook his head. A forest under a ballroom? What madness was this? A shadow passed overhead, and then there was a burst of flame. It was a dragon, and it was setting the trees on fire. Kaito looked around, seeking a route of escape, but his movement caught the dragon's attention, and it bore down on him, enveloping him with flame. It burned with incredible intensity, and then suddenly it was gone. The entire forest was burned down. Kaito had spent enough time with Teferi to know the feel of time magic. What he had witnessed was an echo of the past. Above him, dozens of dragons flew, and there was a burning city. The dragons kept adding to the blaze. There was an abrupt sound of paper ripping, and the landscape flickered. The forest was gone, and Kaito now stood in an underground room with rough stone walls. A staircase led upwards. The room was lit by almost spent candles. Kaito could feel something trying to quietly move closer to him. He tensed and waited till the last moment, then spun and lashed out with his fist. His blow landed, breaking the unknown stalker's nose. It turned out to be Jace Bolarin. Kaito didn't lower his guard. Jace asked, "This is how you treat old friends?" Kaito pointed out the last time they were together was when they fought each other during the Phyrexian invasion. They bickered for a while, not really making any progress, and were interrupted by a groaning sound emanating from the walls. They agreed to fight each other after they dealt with the pressing matter of what was happening now. The story then turns to Tyvar and Zamon in the library. They decided not to split up again. Zamon was pulling out tome after tome for research. Tyvar was concerned she had forgotten their current dire situation. He wished he had a foe to battle head-on instead of this mysterious nonsense. He settled for keeping Zamon safe. She was studying the history of the house. She had determined who the architect was, along with a dozen different owners. She had also found a lot of information on entropy magic, which Tyvar summed up as bad magic. These were spells that distort time and space, and Zamon couldn't quite grasp some of the complexity of these spells. Tyvar heard a fleshy ripping noise echo through the library. Zamon was too engrossed in reading to notice, so he yelled at her to get her attention. She looked up in time to see the bookshelves warping. It hurt to look at, but Tyvar refused to look away. He stepped towards the distortion, and Zamon called for him to stay back. He tried to assure her that he was fine, but was interrupted by a six-eyed biped leaping at him. Its limbs twisted in odd directions, and it was hairless, with a mouth filled with too many teeth. Its claws tore into Tyvar's shoulders, going for its throat, but Tyvar took advantage of its momentum to fling it over his shoulder. He told Zamon to stay back and charged the beast. The shelves it had landed on were warping. The beast itself was the source of the distortion. Zamon snatched up the Ravnican monitor and drew the attention of the horror unintentionally through her movement. Tyvar scooped up a bust from one of the shelves and sent it hurtling at the horror, while also drawing in his magic to turn his own flesh stony. The bust smashed into the beast's head. It quickly forgot Zamon and leapt at Tyvar, snarling. Tyvar was ready this time. He grabbed the creature and dashed it to the floor. He drove his stone-encased legs straight through the creature's chest, and it fell limply. Tyvar stepped away, explaining his magic to Zamon, who had never witnessed anything like it. Tyvar's magic had gotten stronger and no longer required constant contact with the substance he was transforming into. Zamon found it quite interesting, but the conversation was cut short as the horror started reforming its broken chest. It lurched to its feet angrily. This was too much even for the doughty Tyvar. They both ran as fast as they could away from the horror and deeper into the library. And that ends this installment of the Duskmourn House of Horror story. I hope that you enjoyed it. Come on back for the next part. A big thank you to the channel's members and patrons for supporting the work that I do. If you're having a good time with this, you can support me on Patreon or by joining the channel membership. While you're waiting for the next installment to come out, go enjoy some more stories on this channel, because at the end of the day, lore is life.